Bro Rangers then, the winners of this season's GPH Builders Merchants Highland League Cup. Decent day, decent final, game of two halves, Alan?
It certainly was. I think that's the old cliche you could sort of wheel out about it. I mean, it's one of the sort of showpiece days in the whole sort of season, and it didn't disappoint. I thought it was a really good final, a close final, dramatic. Obviously when you get the penalties at the finish, certainly first half, although Brora had that really good chance early on through Tony Dingwall. Fraserburgh maybe with a slight conditions advantage with the wind behind them and playing down the hill were the team that was on top, but I mean Joe Mallon, I'm sure we'll come to him in more detail, but made, well, there was one, maybe the one for Paul Young for the narrow angle you'd probably expect him to save, but his other three saves from Aidan Sopel, Willie West, Ryan Sargent were all excellent saves, I thought, and really I think you see the value of them at the end, because if Fraserburgh got the second goal in that first half and Brora, coming out second half, probably had to chase it a bit more and be a bit more open, I think you might have had a different outcome and the Broch might have gone on and won. But Brora still in the game at 1-0 at half time. They came out with the conditions in their favour in the second half and they really took a grip of the game, and I thought there was a spell, especially in the sort of mid, and Mark Cowie touched on it as well, in the middle of that second half where Martin McLean and Dale Gillespie especially were really able to dictate things, and they really sort of pinned Fraserburgh back. And I mean, over the 90, I mean, obviously Broch had those first half chances, and then Brora had those two good ones, especially at the end with Ali Sutherland and Tony Dingwall, where they could have snatched it. But over the piece, I thought finishing level was about right, and then obviously in the penalties, it's anyone's to win or lose.
As you said, Callum, a few huge chances. The Tony Dingwall one, we were both at the game. The Tony Dingwall one looked, I mean, a certain goal in the moment.
Well, I actually thought the Ali Sutherland one as well, because it's one of them where it's come across and Ali Sutherland's done well to get there, and he gets good contact on it, and on another day that could probably just fly into the roof of the net, and Joe Barber's not got much of a chance, but unluckily for Ali it just fizzed over the top.
To be clear, the Tony Dingwall one in the first half was one I was referring to. Forgetting that he also had the Joe Barber save. But yeah, Ryan Sargent as well. I think he'll probably rue that missed chance late in the second half for Fraserburgh when he beat 4 men, something like that, to go clean through. But ball was of course stopped by Joe Mallon. An unexpected inclusion for Brora, has to be said, on the day, but and perhaps we'll be disappointed with Fraserburgh's goal, which he let in at his near post.
He said that himself.
But I mean, yeah, it was the last time we were at a League Cup final together. The Bucky Brora won 2 seasons ago.
2 seasons.
He was absolutely exceptional. Made a near unbelievable save in that game, and I mean he was as good at the weekend.
He's top notch, Joe. Really, I mean, it's like funny the way things work out, because that final that Brora won 2 years ago, he was he'd been injured before that, and he was sort of hinting that was maybe it for him, but then he still hasn't played a lot of games in the last 2 seasons, but he's still been sort of round about it and part of the coaching staff and things. And then Logan Ross is recalled by Ross County, and I mean, Joe, having somebody of Joe Mallon's capabilities to come in, he couldn't really ask for better. As he said himself, if he'd been fully sort of match sharp, he maybe saves Fraserburgh's goal, but he did more than enough on the day to help Brora, and there he was again, teasing that might be it for him, but I'll believe it when I see it, given how he performed on Saturday. And it's a difficult one, because it's like, in terms of you look over the whole league, there's goalkeepers play every week, but maybe personally when you look at it, when Joe plays, you could maybe say he is still the best goalkeeper around, potentially, but obviously I think he's only played 5 times this season or something like that. But I mean, I was going to say, in terms of the penalties as well, you feel obviously for Sean Butcher, being the rest of the penalties were really good, although I imagine Mark Nicholson maybe gave a few of his teammates a heart flutter with how he tucked his away. But Sean Butcher's was actually a good strike as well. But as Joe touched on in his interview, it's like at that height, if you go the right way, the keeper always feels like they've got quite a good chance. But it's one of them. It's a toss of a coin really with penalties, and Fraserburgh have won cups and shootouts before, but they came out on the wrong side. And Brora, if you stick your 5 away, you've always got a good chance, and Brora did that, so credit to them.
What does the cup win for Brora and the cup final loss for Fraserburgh mean for both sides' seasons overall, would you say? I
mean, for Brora, it puts a very different slant on it. I mean, it's been quite a funny season because you look, they've put another trophy in the cabinet, they've won this trophy again. They also had that very good run in the Scottish Cup to the 4th round. Those are high points, but obviously the other side of it, their league challenge with the sort of schedule they've had has faded, and I know they've games in hand, but sitting 7th in the table just now isn't where you expect to see Brora Rangers, and they've obviously had bother with the pitch at Dudgeon Park and things like that, which I believe will be getting sorted shortly. But so it's been a sort of season of contrast, but certainly I think for any club, any season you win silverware, it's a good season ultimately. And Brora are a club that's used to winning silverware, and they've done it again. So you'd have to say it makes it a good season for them, and for Ali MacDonald as well. His first full season as manager, done it all as a player, but good to get that trophy on your first trophy won as a manager. Looking at Fraserburgh, I mean, I wouldn't say it's been a bad season for them, but clearly if they could have won this on Saturday in the League Cup, which has kind of evaded them for quite a lot of their history, if they could have won that, it would have made it a really good season. It just feels like the league's not totally out of the question yet, but it just feels like they've maybe come up slightly short just in certain games that could have made a big difference in the season. Obviously in the final, wasn't a lot between the sides, and another day they could have won it, but like the semi-final of the Aberdeenshire Cup where they had a bad night, were beaten by Buckie, and there's been a couple of probably results in the league, if they look back, they maybe just rue them slightly, because it's if they had another 3 or 4 points in the league, it would give them a really good chance potentially in the sort of closing stages of the campaign. I mean, I'd still say it's been a good season for them, but again, like Brora, a club and a team that's used to winning things, so if they end up without any trophies at the end of this season, I'd imagine they'll be slightly frustrated.
Okay then, goalless at Princess Royal Park after the game. Buckie manager Graham Stewart said he wasn't best pleased with his title hopefuls dropping more points. Highlights included his feeling they'd battered Vale for the 90 minutes, said his players are too nice, that he needs to get players in who may not have the same ability but will have the dig and desire to go and win a game like that. He also said in probably the headline news that he thinks that's the league gone this season, but he did say if it's not, we don't deserve it due to having the results we've had recently. Not sure I entirely agree with that. I mean, if you win it, you win it. But do you think he's right, Callum, on his players and on the league title race?
No, I think personally, I think there's a fair bit of, I think emotion after the game and frustration and disappointment, but I also think there's a degree of mind games in there. By saying the league, twofold, by saying the league's over, probably to put a rocket up his own players a wee bit and get a response out of them, which I think he probably knows he will get. And the other side of it is probably trying to put a bit more pressure on Brechin as well, because they're in the box seat and have got 2 quite tricky looking games ahead of them this week, which we'll come on to. I mean, I can understand why he's frustrated, because it's like you look at Buckie's record against the sides around them, like against the other 4 sides in the top 5 this season, they've had 8 games. they've got 19 points out of 24, which is, you know, a really good record in those head-to-head encounters against the sort of sides at the top of the league. But they've let them sit. Shows you the difficulties you find in the standard of the league, that they've let themselves down elsewhere. But you still can't at this stage say it's over. I mean, if Buckie win their games in hand, they'd only be 3 points behind, and then if Brechin potentially were to drop points and they're somewhere in their final 4 games, you know, it's all kind of up in the air again. I mean, I suppose at the minute, Graham's concern and the concern of Buckie supporters is they're at the point now where you sort of need to win all your games, and on the evidence of recent weeks, they maybe couldn't have faith that they will win their remaining fixtures. I mean, I do think as well on Saturday you have to give a bit of credit to Devon Vale, certainly. For I know on another day with chances Buckie had, they maybe could have won convincingly, but Vale, mixture of good defending, good goalkeeping, and being resolute, they hung in the game, they kept themselves in there, and towards the end they could have won it with that Ryan Park chance. On another day he probably finds the bottom corner with that. And I think for Devon Vale, given you know, it's a first clean sheet in the league since the 13th of January, and given sort of recent events and losing at home, 3-0 to Strathspey, and then letting a 2-goal lead slip to draw with Lossy last week, you'd have to say for Grant Noble and the Vale side there, it's a good point and something you can take a lot of encouragement from. And as much as likes of myself and other folk, you maybe say ours a lot beforehand, a lot riding on that game for Buckie, those derby games are always big games for, you know, Devon Vale as well. Even though they're not going for a league title, it's still a huge game for them, and they'll be pleased to have got something out of it.
On the other side of the title race, we had Wick Academy 1 at Brechin City 2. Grady McGrath and Kyle Henderson exchanged first half goals for the sides, but Craig Tosh ultimately headed the winner, I believe, after the break for the Hedgemen. I mean, in the context of Wick's recent home form, Fortress Harmsworth, it's a great win for Brechin up there.
It is. They needed to get back to, you know, winning ways after losing at Buckie in midweek, and I thought it was quite, it just shows you how it's like, it doesn't really matter how you get it done as long as you do. Like Gavin Price said afterwards, that in the second half he couldn't really see them scoring, but then they've found something. I mean, Craig Tosh, it's his first goal for Brechin, and you wonder how important it might prove to be in a few weeks' time potentially. And I mean, Wick did really well to beat Buckie last weekend. They've been in that game again, so it's a valuable 3 points for Brechin. I mean, Gary Manson was a bit frustrated with Wick in the second half that they maybe didn't sort of get to grips with the game a bit better and maybe ask a couple more questions, but on another day they maybe get a point. And I mean, Brechin seem to be leaving Harmsworth Park quite relieved, so probably tells its own story. And I mean, looking at the setup of the league now, this week Brechin, they're at Keith on Wednesday, and they're obviously the informed team in the division with the run they're on, and then they go to Fraserburgh on Saturday. It feels to me, it would be my view, if Brechin can come through those 2 games having got at least 4 points, if they get 4 or 6 points out of those 2 games, personally I think they'll go on to win it. But if they were to get less than that, if they were to lose one or draw them both or something, I think it would be very hard to call. But I think if they can come through those, if they come through those 2 games this week with 2 wins, I think they'll go on and win it.
Okay, one of our teams that were previously in the title race, Banks of Dee, they went down 1-0 at Clanacudden on Saturday. Sounded like Connor Bunt's worldie decided this one, but it also sounded like there was some terrific goalkeeping again. Third mention of goalkeeping heroics of the day from Michael Mila in the Clark goal.
Yeah, I mean, Connor Bunce is certainly a player that's capable of the spectacular on his days. he's one of those players. Sometimes you think he only scores good goals. To be to be honest with you, and Michael Mila is somebody who he's only sort of come into the Clach fold in the last sort of month or so, but he's I think in sort of every game he's played, he's impressed in that, and he's clearly had a quite a say on the outcome again on Saturday because he's made a few important saves. I think if you look at this week and last week, you see both sides of Clach, beating Banks a really good result last week, losing to Strathspey when sort of Conor Gethins was saying they're nowhere near good enough. It always seems to be a bit of a roller coaster for the Clach supporters, but I mean that result on Saturday is a sign of what they're capable of. I mean, for Banks it's like Josh Winton said even before Saturday's result he felt they were out of the title race, and it just it's maybe just one of them. If it was earlier in the season and they'd needed to win that game, might they have found a way to convert some of their chances, possibly, but still, they're still sitting in a good position, third in the table, and they've had a good season. But it's just, if they look over the course of their whole season, it's games like Saturdays and others where they've dropped points, which is ultimately stopped them from being closer to winning the league.
Keith 1, Huntly 0, big derby result. That one, it was Gavin Elphinston whose goal made the difference, capitalising a poor back pass to Fraser Hobday in the Huntly goal. Keith are now in their best run since the noughties, I think more than 16 years. It's 10 games unbeaten under Craig Ewan. Are the glory days on their way back to Kynoch Park?
I think Craig Ewan will thank you for that question. But here, they could be. I mean, if they can keep this going till the end of the season and into next season, who knows what could happen, really. I mean, the key thing I think to it is defensively. Craig Ewan said it afterwards, like they don't look like conceding many goals at the moment, and in 10 games unbeaten, and in that 10 games they've only conceded 6 goals. So if you can keep the back door shut like that, it always gives you, if you're keeping clean sheets or keeping down the number of goals you concede, always gives you a chance of at least getting a draw, or gives you a great chance of winning every game if you can do something at the other end. And I mean, they're just rolling on. I've said it previous weeks, but it shows again, like momentum and confidence, the difference that can make. And you're obviously seeing a Keith team that are playing with a lot of confidence. I think the other thing that's quite important is they haven't got, like you're on about, if you're going back to 2007, 2008 or that time, the last time they went unbeaten, they'd obviously the likes of Akami Keith in their team who would guarantee a certain number of goals a season. They haven't really got that, but they've got like Gavin Elphinson's up to 10 for the season, and they've had Mikey Taylor, Jake Stewart, Jordan Cooper. They've had a few players chipping in, and if you haven't got, say, a 20 goal a season player, you need Craig Reid obviously did it as well, but you need everyone to contribute. And I think certainly in the last couple of months Keith have been getting that as well. The flip side for Huntly, I mean, Colin Charlesworth seemed a bit aggrieved about a Ross Still goal that was disallowed in the closing stages, but he did admit that over the piece they'd only really turned up for 35 minutes in the second half. They weren't really at the races, and it's interesting in terms of that battle probably to finish 7th. It kind of brings Nairn back in as well. There's now just, I think, 1 point between them with 2 games left to play, and they play each other in their last game of the season, so that's quite an interesting little race.
As Callum alluded to, Nairn won 4-0 at Strathspey Thistle to capitalise on that Huntly defeat. Callum Mackay, Aaron Nicholson, Andrew McLeod and Alistair Gillies with the Nairn goals. Just a point. I mean, one of the things we spoke about on Saturday before the games all kicked off was potential for a third win on the spin for Strathspey. Didn't get it, but how do you view this result? Are Nairn now in the box seat for this race for 7th that was previously mentioned?
Being just interesting to see what happens this weekend a wee bit. I mean, Huntly go to Banks of D, Nairn are playing for Martin, so going on league position, both are probably starting those games second favourites. So if it's as you were going into that last game between the sides, you'd have to start, for me anyway, you'd have to start with Huntly as slight favourite. If that's the case, as slight favourites to finish 7th, because being a point in front, a win or a draw would be good enough for them, whereas Nairn would have to win. But I mean, the thing about it is both of them are probably capable of getting a result this weekend as well, so it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. In terms of Saturday's game, I mean, Nairn seem to handle the tricky conditions better than Strathspey, took advantage of that and, you know, took control of the game in the first half. I mean, after the break, Strathspey seemed to improve and they created some decent opportunities, and their interim manager Michael Ray was of the view it would have been, if they could have gotten a goal back, you know, sort of early-ish in the second half, it would have been interesting to see what they could have done from there, but they didn't take the chances they created, and, you know, it's in the end it's a good win for Nairn. And I mean, ultimately you look at that Nairn team and some of the scorers on Saturday, like Callum Mackay, Aaron Nicholson, Andrew McLeod, they're all bright, promising young players who will create chances and who always sort of will pose a threat, and that's, you know, demonstrated in what they've done on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay, Turriff United 0, Lossiemouth 0. Another 0-0 draw in the Highland League. Turriff hit the woodwork in this one though 3 times in the second half. It sounded like one of those games perhaps where Turriff did everything well apart from scoring, putting the ball in the back of the net. But Lossie, on the other hand, with their 40-year-old trialist Darren McConaughey in the goals, sounded like they were very resolute, and I think that result improves on last season's points tally for them.
They're up to 28 points, one better than last season with a couple of games to go. It's a funny sort of game, that one, because it seemed like one where both managers were reasonably content. I mean, Warren Cummins, with the pressure maybe and the opportunities Turriff had, obviously would have liked to have won, but in terms of performance he was pretty happy with what he saw. Another side of it, Frank McGettrick for Lossie was pleased to keep a clean sheet, although obviously hitting the woodwork, they maybe rode their luck a wee bit at times, but they kept a clean sheet, they worked hard, they defended their box well, and obviously passing last season's tally as well, so it was good for them. And I mean, Darren McConaughey he had 2 memorable spells at Lossie as a player, also been at the likes of Devonvale and Rothes, really experienced goalkeeper on his day, was one of the top keepers in the league when he was playing in it regularly, and clearly on Saturday's evidence, even though he was just stepping in for Cammy Facher, he's clearly still got it. I suppose you never lose it, maybe.
This is what we've discussed in recent weeks, is we want more of these sort of like slightly aged goalkeepers, you know, none of these footballing goalkeepers. I want these boys, you know. Anyway, Forest Mechanics for Martin United. Forest Mechanics 0 for Martin United 4 is our final game to discuss on this week's show. The visitors led 1-0 at half time through Paul Campbell's early strike. Add their advantage in the second half through Aaron Reid, Julian Wade, and substitute Adam Emsley, all the regular for Martin names in this one. Sounded a little bit like Forest. Felt a bit slightly later in the game.
Seemed to be the case from what Steve McDonald was saying. I mean, a couple of the goals, probably all 3 goals they lost in the second half from a defensive viewpoint, Forest will be very disappointed with. I mean, credit to Fairmartin, they took full advantage, but it sort of seemed like, I thought in the first half, from what I've seen, Forest had a couple of really good chances when the score was at 1-0 and they didn't take them, and then once the second's gone in for Fairmartin, they've gone on and they've won reasonably comfortably. And I mean, it's a good result for them, you know, all their sort of usual front players getting on the score sheet, and first clean sheet they've kept in the league since I think the end of January, which would be welcome for them as well. And I mean, they're still, whether the manager or not, we'll see, but they're still sort of there or thereabouts, trying maybe to be in the top 4 again for Martin, and they're still, you know, a very good side on their day, and they've shown that on Saturday. I mean, I think everyone, Mossett Park as well, is probably disappointed Forrest signed Cameron Ferguson, son of Duncan, on Friday, but unfortunately picked up a wee injury, so wasn't able to play. I think everyone that was going to the game probably would have been looking forward to seeing how he got on as well.
Well, that's one of the weeks ahead. Callum touched on the Highland League table again there, so let's have a look at the latest standings.